Talk to the people at the bar. He said he do have a camera that's facing his way and that they run in the footage back from the date that we gave him. But then the guy said he about 99% sure on the 20th he saw a small U-Haul here, which was the next day after his last known location was here.
In the fall of 2024, investigators in Cleveland, Ohio were faced with a mystery that quickly turned into something far more disturbing. 32-year-old George Cox Jr., known to family and friends as June, had suddenly disappeared. He was a devoted father, and although he had experienced legal troubles in the past, vanishing without contacting his loved ones was completely out of character. On November 8th, George's mother, Sonia Calloway, officially reported him missing after days of unanswered calls. His phone had gone straight to voicemail since late October, leaving his family increasingly worried. George's father, George Cox Sr., had spoken with his son almost every day. Alarmed by the silence, he traveled from Detroit to Cleveland to meet investigators. Using a phone tracking app, he discovered George's last known location had been near an apartment building on Bosworth Avenue on October 19th, the final day anyone heard from him. A nearby business owner recalled seeing a small U-Haul truck outside the building the following day. At first, it seemed like a minor detail, but it would soon take on far greater significance. George Sr. had already entered the apartment before detectives arrived. The door was unlocked, and almost everything inside had been removed. Furniture was gone, personal belongings had vanished, and there was no sign that George had simply packed up and moved. What remained was far more disturbing. George's father pointed investigators toward dark stains scattered across the floor. He believed they were blood that someone had tried to clean. When detectives entered the apartment, they immediately noticed signs of a rushed cleanup. A sofa without cushions sat in the living room, while only a few random household items remained. More importantly, they found suspected blood on the floors, walls, baseboards, and doorways. The stains weren't confined to one location. Blood appeared throughout the apartment, suggesting that someone had been seriously injured while moving from room to room before an attempt was made to erase the evidence. The scene no longer looked like a missing persons case. It looked like a homicide. Further forensic testing confirmed investigators' fears. Luminol revealed blood throughout the apartment, so extensive that detectives later described the scene as lighting up like the northern lights. Whoever had cleaned the apartment had failed to remove the evidence hidden beneath the surface. Now detectives needed to answer one crucial question. Who had been living there with George? His family pointed them toward his longtime girlfriend, Diamond Vaden. The couple had been together for about 4 years, and relatives described their relationship as deeply troubled. Arguments were common, and tensions often ran high. But investigators soon encountered another mystery. Neither George nor Diamond was listed on the apartment lease. The lease belonged to a man named Ezekiel, who was already in prison. Building management explained that the apartment officially belonged to him through a housing assistance program, even though neighbors believed George and Diamond had been living there. Detectives then visited Diamond at another residence just a short distance away on Bosworth Avenue. She was waiting outside with her mother and agreed to speak with them. Diamond denied living in the apartment investigators had searched. Instead, she claimed George actually lived with his sister and only visited her occasionally. According to her, he kept no clothes or belongings at her home. She described their relationship as loving despite occasional arguments, insisting that George had never been abusive toward her. When asked when she last saw him, Diamond said George left on foot around October 18th to meet a friend and never returned. She explained that after several unanswered calls, someone told her George had been arrested in another state because of outstanding warrants. That rumor had spread among friends and family, delaying concern over his disappearance. But detectives had already confirmed it wasn't true. George had never been arrested. He had simply vanished. As investigators questioned Diamond about George's personality, she portrayed him as someone who could lose his temper but insisted he had no enemies who would want to kill him. Her mother painted a very different picture. She told detectives George had been violent, destroyed property during arguments, and had isolated Diamond from her family. She described the relationship as toxic from the beginning, saying George frequently caused chaos wherever he went. While this gave investigators a clearer picture of George's life, it didn't explain the blood-covered apartment, or where his body had gone. Then another inconsistency emerged. The landlord insisted Diamond had been living inside the very apartment where detectives discovered the blood. Diamond firmly denied ever setting foot inside the building. One of them was lying. Investigators had no surveillance footage to settle the dispute, but before long, Diamond herself would unknowingly provide the evidence that changed everything. As detectives continued investigating, they focused on one major contradiction. Diamond insisted she had never lived in the blood-stained apartment, and claimed she didn't even know the man listed on the lease, Ezekiel. According to her, the landlord had simply mistaken her for someone else. But investigators weren't convinced. Only minutes after speaking with police, Diamond called the landlord herself. Unknown to her, detectives were already on the phone with him, and he quietly connected them to the call. What they heard immediately raised suspicions. Diamond coached the landlord on what to tell police about the apartment. She even instructed him not to mention that she and George had been staying there, saying that neither of them should say anything. In that moment, detectives knew she had lied. 2 days later, Diamond agreed to a formal interview at the police station. The detectives didn't reveal everything they knew, but they made it clear the apartment contained overwhelming evidence of a violent crime. They explained that forensic testing had confirmed the presence of blood throughout the apartment. Every room showed signs of an attempted cleanup, and investigators had collected DNA from walls, floors, door handles, and household surfaces. When confronted about lying over where she lived, Diamond continued denying she had ever stayed there. The detectives weren't buying it. They told her they had numerous witnesses who would testify that she and George had been living together in the apartment. They also revealed they had recovered personal belongings with her name on them, including paperwork and even a diary. Still, Diamond refused to admit the truth. Meanwhile, detectives had also searched the home where Diamond was currently living with another man named William Rogers. Inside, they found several items that immediately caught their attention. There was a mop and bucket showing signs of possible blood, a handgun hidden beneath a mattress, and a pair of black hunter boots that appeared ordinary at first glance. But when forensic experts tested the boots with luminol, they discovered traces of blood that had been carefully cleaned away. Investigators confronted Diamond with the evidence. She claimed she had no idea how blood could have gotten onto the boots and insisted she had never harmed George. The detectives offered another possibility. Maybe she hadn't acted alone. Perhaps someone else killed George, and she had only helped clean up afterward. Even then, Diamond denied any involvement. To investigators, however, the growing list of evidence painted a different picture. She had lied about living in the apartment, attempted to influence a witness, and physical evidence was beginning to connect her directly to the crime scene. Before ending the interview, Diamond agreed to provide a DNA sample and handed over her cell phone for forensic examination. That decision would prove devastating. Months passed before another major breakthrough came. In May 2025, kayakers on the Huron River spotted what appeared to be a body floating near thick vegetation. Emergency crews recovered the remains. The body was wrapped tightly in a bedsheet and loosely tied with ropes around the waist and legs before being dumped into the river. Because of the advanced decomposition, the medical examiner couldn't determine exactly how the victim had died. But investigators soon confirmed the victim's identity. It was George Cox Jr. Although the autopsy couldn't establish a precise cause of death, detectives already believed they had enough evidence to prove he had been murdered. Now they only needed to prove who was responsible. The biggest breakthrough came from Diamond's cell phone. Although she had deleted much of her internet history, forensic specialists recovered her browsing activity. The searches told a chilling story. Just after midnight on October 20th, only hours after George was last known to be alive, Diamond searched questions like, "What are the chances of surviving multiple stab wounds to the abdomen?" Minutes later, she searched whether a knife should be removed from someone who had been stabbed. She then looked up which stab wounds were fatal and how long someone could survive after being stabbed. To investigators, these weren't random internet searches. They matched exactly what they believed had happened inside the apartment, while George was still alive. Her phone also revealed another disturbing detail. Weeks later, she searched news articles about missing people whose bodies had been found in rivers, suggesting she was closely following cases that resembled George's disappearance. By this point, investigators believed they had enough evidence to arrest Diamond Vaden for George's murder. But before the case could be closed, detectives wanted one final interview. And this time, they planned to confront her with everything they had uncovered. By the time detectives brought Diamond Vaden in for another interview, the investigation had changed dramatically. Forensic testing confirmed that the blood found throughout the apartment belonged to George Cox Jr. Even more damaging, the blood discovered on the hunter boots recovered from Diamond's residence was also a match. Investigators had also uncovered messages showing how Diamond gained access to the apartment in the first place. Pretending to be the imprisoned leaseholder's sister, she convinced the housing agency to give her a set of keys. She and George then secretly moved into the apartment without authorization. When detectives confronted her with the evidence, Diamond admitted pretending to be Ezekiel's sister but claimed she did it only to get into the apartment. She still denied having anything to do with George's death. Then detectives turned to the evidence from her cell phone. Although she had deleted many of her searches, forensic experts recovered them. They showed that during the early hours of October 20th, around the time investigators believed George was dying, Diamond searched questions about surviving multiple stab wounds, whether a knife should be removed from a victim, and which stab wounds were fatal. When asked why she searched those topics, Diamond claimed she couldn't remember and insisted she often searched random things online. The explanation made little sense. Investigators also revealed another critical piece of evidence. When George's body was recovered from the Huron River, it had been wrapped in a bedsheet. During a search of Diamond's residence, detectives found a matching sheet from the same bedding set. The physical evidence, combined with the blood, phone records, and witness statements, left little room for doubt. Detectives believed George had been stabbed inside the apartment, left to bleed as he desperately tried to survive, and later wrapped in bedding before being transported to the river. Still, one question remained. How had Diamond managed to clean an entire apartment, remove a body, and dispose of it without help? Investigators suggested she had accomplices. At first, Diamond denied it. But detectives explained that cooperating could affect how prosecutors viewed her case. Faced with overwhelming evidence, she finally admitted she wasn't completely alone. In the summer of 2025, Diamond was indicted on 2 counts of murder, felonious assault, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. Rather than face trial, she accepted a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of involuntary manslaughter along with the related charges. As part of the agreement, she identified 2 men she claimed had helped clean the apartment and dispose of George's body. One was her roommate, William Rogers. The other was a man named Donald, who was known around the Bosworth neighborhood. Investigators examined her claims, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge either man. On March 11, 2026, Diamond appeared in court for sentencing. George's father delivered an emotional victim impact statement. He spoke about the heartbreak of searching for his son while trusting the very person responsible for his disappearance. He recalled how Diamond had reassured him she would never hurt George, even though she already knew his body had been wrapped in a sheet, tied with ropes, and dumped into a river more than an hour away. He reminded the court that despite George's flaws, he was still a son, a father, a brother, and someone who deserved the chance to live. When it was Diamond's turn to speak, she offered a brief apology, and described the killing only as an unfortunate circumstance. The judge wasn't satisfied. He asked her directly what had happened. For the first time, Diamond admitted that George had been beaten and stabbed. She acknowledged that while George was bleeding and begging her to save him, she never called 911. Instead, she searched online to find out how long someone could survive after suffering multiple stab wounds. When the judge asked why she didn't help him, Diamond simply said she panicked. The court rejected that explanation. The judge pointed to her internet searches, the elaborate cleanup of the apartment, the disposal of George's body, and the weeks of deception that followed. None of it reflected panic. Instead, it showed deliberate efforts to cover up the crime and avoid responsibility. Diamond Vaden was sentenced to a minimum of 19 years and 7 months in prison, with a maximum sentence of just over 25 years, followed by post-release supervision. The motive behind George Cox Jr.'s murder was never fully explained. What the evidence did reveal was a tragic sequence of lies, violence, and calculated attempts to hide the truth. In the end, it wasn't a confession that solved the case. It was the blood that couldn't be cleaned, the digital trail that couldn't be erased, and the relentless work of investigators who refused to let George Cox Jr.'s disappearance become another unsolved mystery.